What if the most powerful man in the world had no moral limits, no law that could reach him, no force capable of bringing him down? What exactly would it take for him to finally fall? That question has been hanging over everyone's head since The Boys first started. But now, with the fifth season, it's stopped being philosophical and become urgent. Because what these first two episodes put on the table isn't just narrative tension, it's a growing feeling that the clock has finally started ticking. Let me tell you what happened, and more importantly, what it means. When Season 4 ended, Homelander was at the top, literally, not metaphorically. The guy had turned the United States into a country where a soup could literally spit on someone in public and get a standing ovation for it. Vought had penetrated the government, the judiciary, the media, and the worst part, a huge chunk of the population was on his side, not out of fear, by choice. That's what makes Homelander different from any ordinary villain. He doesn't need to threaten you. He convinces you that he deserves your love. And then Season 5 pulls back the curtain. The first episode opens in a way that hits you straight in the throat. The America we see is no longer a dystopia disguised as normalcy. It's a dystopia out in the open and proud of it. Uniformed soups patrolling streets, dissidents disappearing, Vought operating as if it were the new state, and Homelander at the center of it all, not as a nervous dictator who needs to prove himself, but as someone who has finally arrived where he always believed he deserved to be. That's what's most chilling. He's not anxious, he's satisfied. And satisfaction in a character like this is more terrifying than rage. But here's where the crack in the armor begins, and the writers are surgical about it. Because when you put a narcissist in absolute power, what inevitably happens? He starts to betray himself. Not out of weakness, out of overconfidence. Homelander starts making decisions he would have once disguised with PR and propaganda smiles. Now he doesn't even bother. And that carelessness begins creating fractures in places he doesn't even notice. The second episode deepens this in an interesting way. Butcher, and here the show makes a bold choice, is dealing with the consequences of what he's done. Not in a redemptive, feel-good way, like character learns his lesson and becomes a hero. No. Butcher is broken in a specific way. He still wants to destroy Homelander, but now he has to live with the fact that the methods he used made him resemble the very thing he hates. And that internal tension works as a direct mirror of what the series wants to say about power and corruption. Meanwhile, Huey is navigating completely new territory. With his father in a fragile state, the show uses that relationship far more intelligently than it first appeared. He finds himself torn between his personal world and the impossible mission of bringing down someone the entire system now protects. There's a specific scene in these two episodes where Huey looks at everything around him, and you can see on his face the weight of realizing there's no longer a legal, institutional, or moral framework he can call on. There's no more the adults will handle it. He is the adult, and that's devastating. Annie, Starlight, remains the moral heart of the series, but what these episodes do to her is pull the ground out from under her feet. Because being the moral compass of a story in a world where that doesn't pay the bills is a lonely and dangerous position. She doesn't give up, but the cost of that becomes more visible with every scene, in her body, her eyes, the choices she's forced to make. Now, about Homelander specifically, because he's the center of everything. There's a moment in the second episode that sums up the entire arc of the season so far. He's in an environment that should feel like a celebration, something public, surrounded by supporters, and for 1 second, one brief second, you see something in his eyes. It's not fear, it's almost boredom, as if absolute power finally arrived and he discovered something is still missing. That the void he always tried to fill with admiration and control is still there. That's brilliant from a narrative standpoint, because what the series is building isn't just the heroes are going to take down the villain. It's suggesting that Homelander may self-destruct, not because he grew weak, but because what he truly wants is impossible to have. He wants to be genuinely loved, and forced power will never give him that. Ryan, his son, is the most explosive piece on this board right now, because Ryan spent the previous season being shaped by Homelander, being pulled to his side. And the question hanging over these first 2 episodes is, how deep did that damage go? Does Ryan still have a moral anchor, or did Homelander manage to create a version of himself without the original traumas, which would make him even more dangerous? The show hasn't answered that yet, and it's doing that on purpose. What these 2 episodes build at their core is an architecture of collapse, not a fast, spectacular superhero-style fall, a fall that comes from within, from excess, from growing isolation even within power, from enemies he still underestimates because he thinks he's already won. And the boys, they're operating in a mode they've never operated in before. No structure, no government support, no illusion that there's a right way to do this. It's pure improvisation, desperation, and stubbornness. And paradoxically, that makes them more dangerous than when they had resources, because now there's truly nothing left to lose. The direction in these 2 episodes deserves a quick mention. There are camera choices that position Homelander always slightly above the frame when he's with other characters, not in an obvious way, but just enough to create visual unease. And when he appears beside Ryan, for the first time in the entire series, those positions reverse in at least one scene, a subtlety that says everything without saying a word. The soundtrack continues using American pop music in an ironic and precise way, and there's a specific choice at the end of the 2nd episode that will stay in your head for days. I won't spoil which one, but when you hear it, you'll understand. What this season seems to be doing, and it's a risky bet that so far is paying off, is bringing the series back to its roots of political and social critique, but with the accumulated weight of 4 seasons pressing down on every single scene. It's no longer light satire, it's satire with teeth, with blood. Will Homelander fall? Technically, the series has to end at some point, but the more interesting question isn't whether he'll fall, it's what will be left standing when he does. Because Vought still exists, the system that created him still exists, the voters who loved him still exist. Taking down Homelander without dismantling everything that sustained him would be an empty victory, and the show knows that. These first 2 episodes are planting seeds for a conclusion that probably won't be satisfying in the classic good triumphed sense. It's going to be a dirty, costly, incomplete victory, the kind that leaves people looking at each other asking, "What now?" Which, let's be honest, is exactly how it works in real life. So let me leave you with one thing to think about until the next episode. If Homelander represents the worst human instincts disguised as strength and protection, and the show makes it clear he only exists because society created and fed him, what exactly are we willing to destroy within ourselves to make sure someone like him never reaches power again?